Well, hello there, and welcome all you splendid weirdos to our live hang. This is your buddy Dave over at Mars X3D. And, well, we got some things planned tonight. It's been a very interesting week and a lot of developments in the 3D world, most of which I failed to make work. But, that just kind of goes with the territory. I want to go ahead and welcome my friend Alan from Mars, the Second Genesis. And by golly, I wonder if anybody else is, maybe it's just you and me tonight, Alan. That could be. There's so much beautiful spring weather all over the temperate parts of the world that I don't blame people for being outside and barbecuing and fishing or just sitting on the back porch, whatever it is that people do. I like doing it too. I was tempted to go fishing tonight, but I thought if I blew everybody off, they'd keep blowing me off. Hey, Raymond, very nice for you to show up. I appreciate that, my friend. And another day in paradise, yeah. Oh, I lived in Arizona for a number of years, and I really did like it out there. It's a beautiful, beautiful state. And so, well, we have two notables with us then, Raymond and Alan, both heavy hitters in the world in general. And so I've been working with trying to refine. Oh, Planetary Protector just showed up. Thank you for coming by tonight. Trying to get the looking glass functioning, and I think I pretty much do at this point. And I don't know how I did it, actually. I have no idea how I did it. Hello, Jose. Thank you. I appreciate your nice remarks. I love the channel too. That's why I do it. Ramona's here. Good evening, Ramona. Everybody say howdy. And anyway, working on that looking glass, and so I have it working. But now here's my problem. Madman Unmasked and Crazy A. All right, we got the two bad boys in the house. We're kind of going to keep an eye on you guys. And yeah, thank you, Planetary. Love those thumbs up. It sure helps me to stay on the air. That's what I get instead of pay, is a thumbs up. Always glad to get them. And here's the problem with the looking glass. Not really a problem, but, I already have a whole bunch of 3D images that I've already made the way I want them. And their online conversion software is really quite good, but it's not perfect. And I kind of skew towards perfection. Don't always make it, but I fuss over my images until they're just the way I want them. So, hey, Don, thanks for showing up. Wow, we're getting some real Class A weirdos in the audience tonight. And Martin Wolfright, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for stopping in. Everybody gets a 5-minute leeway. I'm putting a quarter in the can by the door. So after 5 minutes, though, you got to pony up if you want to be part of the weirdo gathering. So what I'm looking for, and you would think it would be an easy thing to get. Hi, Randall. Welcome aboard, my friend. You think it would be an easy enough thing to have a piece of software into which you could load a stereo image and then say, create a depth map based upon this stereo image. And then have that depth map, which you could then join to the left image, load it into the looking glass environment, because that's how you load them into the looking glass portrait and the other displays. It's a left image and a depth map. and then their own algorithms assemble a holographic image from that. Well, I can't do that. At least I haven't figured it out yet. And meanwhile, it can't figure out the Mars images. I don't know why that is. Hey, Pat, I'm here too, and I'm glad you are. It can't figure out imagery from Mars various cameras. I don't know why. I mean, one or two of them it's done a pretty good job with, but not even close to what I do. And unless I can put my images into the looking glass environment, that's going to be a wash for conferences. Because before I shell out however many thousands of dollars, which I don't actually have, for a 35-inch holographic monitor, I got to be sure I can load my stuff in there. Makes sense, doesn't it? Really, I should be paying more attention. But, you know, Alan was so helpful for me over at Mars, the second Genesis. And I've been checking out Triaxis software all day. Oh, man, I can't get it to work. I've been checking out what's called DMAG, a depth map automatic generator. You got to have a degree in computer science to make that work, and I don't. And I don't have time to learn it. You know, I mean, wah. But, you know, to get an episode out each week, I need at least 5 to 6 hours, 5 to 6 days a week to get all this stuff done. And to put me in a learning curve for another really complex piece of software is, that's a no-go. So I may farm it out to some software engineers and say, hey, can you do this? And if you can, how much is it going to cost me? That's my next step tomorrow, unless I get some really solid answers. So, anyway, now that we have and let me say that Alan is doing a great job putting together X3D for his channel. His images are super sharp and clear, beautifully processed, stereo windows set properly. And now the only thing to do is to find some real cutting-edge non-fractal anomalies and present those. And so while we're talking about Mars Second Genesis, let me urge each of you to head over there and subscribe, because Alan has been gone for a while, not only due to COVID, but due to another situation he had to deal with where his entire channel disappeared. And he's back up, and he did a tutorial on how to make your old converting IMGN data files and make your own high-res images. That's a wonderful thing, and that's been very closely guarded arcane knowledge amongst the community. In fact, I told Alan today that I have requested the heavy hitters in the field, you'd know their names, but I won't say them, to do a tutorial video to show us poor schmoes how it's done so we can do it ourselves. But it's a very closely guarded secret. But Alan is of the philosophy, as am I, that knowledge shared increases all of our capacities for participation in this particular quest. So gigantic kudos out to Alan Walker at Mars the Second Genesis for what you're doing, man. Those tutorials are fantastic. So, okay, here's what we got going today. We're going to start off, as I mentioned last week, and I generally do every week, I practice converting two-dimensional images to 3D images. And I practice on various photographs that I like, that type of thing, to sharpen and hone my skills for those Mars images where I don't have the benefit of a stereo pair. Hey, welcome to the group, Ricardo. Wow. Now, he's a very scientific weirdo. Glad to have him around. In fact, all of you are. Except for me, I'm just a slapdash, half-crazy musician doing something he loves. So anyway, I work on 2D images, converting them to 3D. So I'm going to show you the images that I've been working on this week. Starting out with what I think is a very cool truck conversion. Oh my gosh. Looks to be maybe a 9-cylinder radial aircraft engine slipped into, you car experts will know what vintage truck that is, but oh my gosh, that's a beautiful thing to me. I love it. And wouldn't you love to own that truck? I can just imagine not only the spectacular sound that it must make, but the incredible torque that that radial engine puts out. I would think when you floor it, the car would probably roll over on its side. And here's a little Kingfisher I was working on, just for fun. They're so colorful. And yeah, Alan, I heard that your wife fired Elvis. And yeah, Don, that truck needs wings, doesn't it? But anyway, the reason I'm showing you these things is A, because you can see them in X3D. Oh, Randall, you saw this run and drive on YouTube? Holy moly, man. Send me a link, will you? Anyway, the reason I'm showing you this is because this is how I stay in shape for Mars images that I have to produce from flat images sometimes. And here's one of the first bass of the season, caught on my birthday last week on Thursday. And not a huge bass, but a good way to start the season, a good way to celebrate a birthday. And of course, that Rapala is deadly. It works all the time. And I like working on old black and white images too. I think that's fun. And this is a 1950s ice cream shop called I Scream. Hoot hoot, ice cream. Back in those days, you could get a whopping cone for a nickel. Those days are gone, aren't they? And yeah, Don, that's my new kayak that I've been handily paddling about, fishing and enjoying the 520-acre lake right near my house. Unfortunately, you can't eat the fish out of there because they're loaded with dioxin and mercury. Yeah, the Rapalas are good, aren't they, Crazy A? I had a great birthday, too. Now, here's something I just did today because it's one of my favorite anomalies, but it's on Earth. This is the Temple of Hathor in Dendera in Egypt. Thank you, Ramona. Thank you for your happy birthday wishes. And you can see, and there's some argument about this, but those are vitrified stairs. You can see where the rock turned molten and then flowed down the center of the stairs. There are some people who say, "Oh no, you dummy, that's just water." Well, I'm afraid not. Look at the flow patterns. Water does not erode like that in solid stone. It does not have a flow. It's not an alluvial flow pattern, if you want to get technical. Good to see you, Kamikaze. Love you, man. And thank you for your birthday wishes. And yeah, Randall, that could sure be a sun flare. But here's something that puzzles me. Why did it melt just there and not the walls and the ceiling? How does that happen? The only thing I can think is that maybe there was a previous temple that was destroyed in that solar flare or nuclear blast or whatever it was. And they rebuilt it around the staircase because the staircase is the hardest thing to do. And it may be that when the steps were vitrified, well, that makes them really hard to dig out of there, doesn't it? Because they're all joined together. And here's my last little project for the week that I call Fire Blossom. And it's just a picture that I found that I like real well. I like old pulp science fiction. And yeah, you know, it could be an electrical flow, Ricardo. And but here's the question, Don. If there are chemicals that'll melt rock like that, and obviously it melted it thoroughly, quickly, and it flowed down the center, the low part, where the steps were already worn by probably centuries of foot traffic. Well, our chemical science and technology is vastly in advance of ancient Egypt. Why don't we have any of those chemicals to melt rock? And why do we see nothing else like this except for perhaps, and Alan maybe has visited these, the vitrified forts in Scotland. And I believe, yeah, there could be crystal devices. As a matter of fact, if you've ever read any of the old Edgar Cayce books, they said that they had a thing called a fire crystal, a great big thing that supplied energy for the entire continent. And that their misuse of that fire crystal led to the sinking of Atlantis. A good point, Randall. A vertical surface doesn't present the same amount of coverage. And yeah, crazy. It's been turned to glass, hasn't it? So anyway, let's get started with Mars. That's enough of the personal development stuff. And here is, we're starting off with something that my friend Jim West, he went way back into the Spirit archives, Spirit Seminole, and he found a very strange thing. Now, you know, I've been promising this, but I'm going to show you the anomaly first in its basically in its raw state. Okay? Now this is a kind of a mouse hole in the rock. And as you're turning your X3D eyes onto this, this is what it looks like in the raw state. And then I turn on the lights. Are you ready? Take a look at this. See what I mean? I turn on the lights. Now, I haven't changed anything, but I brought up the gamma, worked a little bit with the contrast. And that's a big difference. Let me go back. If you're still looking at this one, see how dark and grungy that looks? And now we turn on the lights again. Ta-da! And all of my images, if you compare them to the originals, are much, much brighter and easier to see. And you need that in a 3D image in order to have the eye react naturally to it. Now, what gets me? That mouse hole, look, first of all, is perfectly even. And it's got the nice little bevel around the edge with a lip on it. So what is that? I don't think a critter made that. But I don't know what that is. What would have made that? Now, it's not being occupied at the current time because you can see there are no tracks or pathways worn into the sand, are there? But let me ask you this. If you were right there on Mars and could walk up to it, would you stick your hand in there? Could be. Could be. I don't know if I would. I think any of you, Dale knows, he lives in Arizona. And you know you don't randomly reach into things because there's scorpions in there or black widows. Do they have those on Mars? I don't know. But I don't want to find out by sticking my hand in it. And it does look like a horseshoe, doesn't it? I mean, it's that clear. And yeah, that piece to the left, of course, that's all Martian bluestone scattered in front. And that's the actual color of the stone. That's not an image artifact. And let me go back to the context view. And there you see it inside the box. No metrics available for this, but I would say, very conservatively speaking, that that's probably 2, possibly even 3 feet across. Yeah, some wiseacres put my name on the rocks there, isn't they? So let's move on to another one. What do you say? This is one, this is a famous egghead from Curiosity 711 mass cam. And just a reminder that it's the mast cam. It's not a master camera. It's a mast cam because it sits on top of a mast. But anyway, now some of you will have recognized that egghead up at the top. The arrows are pointing right at it. And, there's been so much arguing and discussion about that. Some say it's a Paracas skull. Some say it's a Nephilim. Some say it's an alien skull. So I'm not even going to go there, okay? What I'm going to look at is this, inside the green target. Now, once again, What is that? Doesn't look like anything, does it? But as we zoom in, will you look at that? Now, that to me is definitely non-fractal. First of all, you have that beautiful right angle carved in there with three kind of finger-like appendages poking out at an angle. And it is a little bit blurry, but you know that above it, slanting off to the upper right, is a whole line of holes drilled into that rock. What's that all about? Randall, sorry you got the honeydews. I know what those are, and I know you'll do a good job. Thanks for stopping by, my friend. Have a great evening. But then also down at about the 4 o'clock position, it looks like it's attached to the stone. A perfectly symmetrical egg-shaped piece that seems to be part of that stone. Now, some of you are going to point out to me immediately to the right what looks like a skull. And is that a skull? Probably not. It's got two eye sockets though and a nose. Even looks like it has a bit of a zygomatic arch under that eye that's on the right. But is it a skull? I don't know. Probably not. Probably not at all. Okay. So, let's come back to the Renaissance Laboratory and take a little breather. I imagine some of your eyes are, for people who are new to X3D viewing, as they're growing accustomed to it, sometimes they get tired a little easier until they learn to relax into it. I've been doing it for so many years. It's as natural to me as looking right now, parallel viewing. There's no strain, doesn't bother me, not one thing. And Don, you're right. Everything is blown up on Mars, isn't it? Just absolutely like the whole planet was thrown into a blender and whipped on high for way too long and poured back out. I mean, everything is just absolutely torn up. And I'm wondering, before we go back to the Mars images, what kind of questions you might have for me tonight. And it's nice if it can be questions about Mars or space or 3D or something, but I'm willing to entertain just about anything. And yeah, Kamikaze, I gotta agree, so much of what we see up there looks to be machine remnants, doesn't it? And that's why, so often what we see that looks machine-like appears to be rock. So, were they making functioning machines out of stone? Because that's certainly possible. They were that good with stone. Or are they just fossils or mud fossils? Two different things. Or are they, and sometimes we'll find things that look like remnants that actually have corrosion, that are quite corroded and look like they were made out of metal at one time. Yeah, Alan is saying in the Stereo Photomaker, SPM, you can put a grid temporarily to aid anomaly hunting. Now, for me in particular, I don't need to do that. Not because I'm wonderful or anything, but only because my eyes have been doing this for so very long that I pick out non-fractals very quickly. And what I'll do, and by the way, you'll use Command G or Control G on the prehistoric Windows system to bring up the grid. And you can adjust the size of the grid. And this is normally used in alignment because occasionally in Stereo Photomaker, the auto align function breaks down. If things are too widely disparate in their separation, or for various other reasons, they won't auto align. And so you can throw that grid on there and you can line up homologous points on either side of the picture and get a real good result. But what I will do on stereo images is get them loaded and aligned, and sometimes I'll do processing on them first to clarify and clean up and get rid of all the garbage, and then I'll just zoom in real tight, right to the breakup point, and then I'll do a grid search over the entire image, a little bit at a time, looking for those non-fractal clues or things that just catch my eye, that just don't seem to belong there. And here's the thing, and I've mentioned this before, and this is something if you're new to anomaly hunting, you want to be aware of. And that is that initially, everything looks like an anomaly. Oh my God, an anomaly. And you got to kind of get over that and raise the bar and look for things that stop you in your tracks. They go, whoa, look at that. Something that's very clearly non-fractal or so very unusual as to preclude it being a geological feature. And we're going to look at one of those in just a minute. And Kamikaze, I understand your frustration there, trying to tell people to go look at things. But here's the reality of human nature. We won't do it unless you extract and process what you're talking about and present it to us. We just don't have the time. I know I don't. I know Chris Maroney doesn't. Jimmy may have more time than we do because he only puts out an episode every once in a great while. But still, we don't have, to search Olympus Mons, that's a huge area. And those orbiter images are high res, and you can spend, like I have spent on some of Neil Spence's orbital images of Mars. I've spent hours on just one swatch because you can zoom in so far. So it's just, we don't have the luxury of time like that. I'm reading some messages here. And Raymond, I don't know. I don't know if they created embossed materials, did it almost like a freeze type where they used to put plaster over something and paint it. Well, they're not doing that, but you're talking about laying on a layer of stone and then shaping it. Yeah, I suppose that's certainly possible. But then you see, there are these really spectacular megalithic carvings on Mars that really couldn't be done that way. That would be like saying Mount Rushmore is a plaster overlay that's been molded. They're just too big to support that process. I'm not saying it isn't possible or that maybe it's not done on a smaller scale. But the evidence I've seen of the ancient Martians' capability with stone is really breathtaking. They didn't seem to have any limits. Okay, let's take a trot over here to 29 23, something, a giga macro by Neil Spence. I'll let you look at that for a moment as I catch up with some of the remarks here. And to answer Alan's question, do I use the free program HiView for viewing satellite images? I can and I have, but I don't, because orbital images do not lend themselves well to 3D. They're a real pain in the butt to work with, and there's very rarely sufficient stereo separation, unless they do what's called a hyperstereo, where they snap one image and then travel 100 miles and snap another and then put them together as a stereo image. So I rarely look at orbital images because there's no really good 3D material in there. I want up close and personal. Well, that's pretty cool, Kamikaze. If you have the original, the actual direct download link to NASA, that could be very useful, especially if it was shared. Anyway, a couple of items here that I thought were pretty interesting for their erosional properties. Take a look at this little guy. Now, not spectacular, I grant you, but does erosion account for the right angle, or for that piece, vertical piece coming out at a 45-degree angle from the right angle, or for what looks like a letter A on there, or those parallel grooves? I mean, this is a very suspicious looking little rock. But you know, I'm willing to grant that this might be a rock. Could be. But now look at this one. Now that looks really mechanical to me. And here's why. It's pretty obvious the various angles that are revealed in there, right angles and various other things. But then look at that top corner, very top. There's half a spoked wheel coming out of there. And look directly below it on the side facing us, the closest side. And there is a loop there that almost looks like the hasp on a padlock. That to me looks like a mechanical piece. And Ricardo, I have to agree with you. I think a lot of what we see are arc discharges from close encounters with other planetary bodies, whatever they may be. Yeah, Ramona, I can't argue with that. Wouldn't it be nice if they just bring this stuff back? Very strange rock. Then my buddy Laszlo. I like Laszlo because he's very consistent. He's a guy that does research every day, all week long, 7 days a week. And he finds stuff, little stuff. But this particular one is one I call hatchling. It's there inside the yellow target. And again, from this distance, doesn't really jump out for the average person. I'm attracted by the roundness of it. I see a very even roundness on the right side, and so I would just automatically jump in. And by the way, the image that Laszlo posted was one of the crappy JPEGs, and it was real blurry and indistinct. This is an image that I processed myself from the Analyst's Notebook based upon Alan's tutorials and generous help. And I got a much sharper image of this rascal. Take a look at this. Is that weird? I think that's pretty darn strange. It looks like something hatching out of an egg, to my eyes. Matter of fact, it's even got a leg. Looks like a leg stuck out there in front, like it's backing out of the egg. Is that a dinosaur of some kind? A lizard? It's a big one. I have no idea what that is, but it ain't natural. Okay, here's another raw image. You can uncross your eyes now. And this is another one that Laszlo found. And as you look at this image, do you see anything that seems out of place there? Okay, now I'm going to go to X3D and I'm going to turn on the lights. Are you ready? Boom. And what Laszlo found is there inside the box. Thank you, Don. I think that egg, whatever it is, I think that's a pretty cool find myself too. Laszlo's always finding cool stuff. But you know, that's from this distance, you know, if I'm looking at it, it doesn't look like anything to me. I see a little bit of a circle on the right side in the darker portion, and I would probably zoom in to look at that. So before I show you my 3D on what that is, and yeah, Ramona, it does look like a bug coming out of an egg, doesn't it? Oh man. Okay, here's a close-up on it. And there is a circle on the right. And the darker stone there. Okay, get ready for your X3D and turning on the lights. Boom. I call this one Laszlo's Lair because that looks like a habitation. Looks like a tube, a tubular structure made to look like rock, or maybe it's carved into the rock. I don't know. But as you look on the lighter portion of that, at first I thought that was another circle. But then as you look more closely, there are all kinds of shapes on there. I don't know if they're natural or carved. And it does look like a tunnel, doesn't it? But then look how this whole tube takes a bend towards us right as it turns into darker stone. And look how there's stitching, almost a biscuit joint, so to speak, between the lighter portion and the darker portion. See that? Then you've got that porthole. Now, what is that? Is that for looking out of? Is that for flying into with a ship or a big flying critter? But look at that nice rim around it. It couldn't be more clear or more obviously manufactured. And then that front end that faces a CS dished out. And if you look below that porthole and come forward, you'll see tubing and spheres. So my thought, hey Lee, thanks for stopping by. So this is actually a pretty complex piece of business. And I'm pretty impressed that Laszlo was able to pick this all out and find it in 2D, no less, in a crappy image. That's how good he is. Okay. Aha! We're back in the lab. But anyway, so that's what's coming up for this week's episode. And we'll go through and cycle again on some of the images that I showed right at the very beginning. And as I mentioned, then I do work on converting 2D images to 3D. Man, is that an ongoing learning curve. And there's ample room for sucking within that context. But I'm gradually getting better. And I particularly like this conversion truck with a radial engine in there. That has got to be, is it detuned? I don't know. I would say that's anywhere between a 300 and 450 horsepower radial aircraft engine. And man, the sound that thing makes and the torque it cranks out. Somebody did an amazing piece of work there. And then I chose to work on this Kingfisher because of its complex rounded body. And I need practice in doing what's called volumetric work, giving it a sense of volume, of curvature. That gets kind of involved. But yeah, what an amazing truck that is, and what a colorful Kingfisher. And then I did a 3D on the first bass of the season, caught last week. And it's not flawless 3D, but it's good enough for my purposes. Out in my kayak on the reservoir. Not a huge bass, but it's a good sign for the season to catch one. I guess he was about 2 pounds or so. Nothing to write home about, but still he's got a belly on him. That means that rascal's going to grow into a lunker before too long. And then we just slip into the past for a Hoot Hoot ice cream. Back in the day when cones were a nickel. And they used all kinds of rotten ingredients like real heavy whipping cream and pure cane sugar and real vanilla bean and real chocolate. Bastacular, Don says. Thank you, sir. And I know maybe it's just being a kid and all, but it seems to me ice cream back in that time, and that's my time right there you're looking at, it sure tasted better. And then we stopped by the Temple of Hathor, Dendera, in Egypt. Vitrified stairs. Melted rock turned into glass, flowing down the staircase and solidifying very soon thereafter. So was that a solar flare that brought that on? And if it was really that hot, how come the walls aren't melted? And you can see that, I imagine most of you have walked on old staircases where the middle where you step is all worn down. So my feeling is that these steps were already very, very old whenever this happened, and that there was a center portion that was worn down, and Of course, naturally, that's where the liquid rock is going to flow, the path of least resistance. Thank you, Crazy A. We got another one coming up Friday morning. Episode 96. Looking at. And for my final practice picture, one I call Fire Blossom. I love pulp fiction, pulp science fiction covers. Old book covers, things like that. They can be a real challenge to move into the third dimension. You're right, Don. Used to be. Have you ever seen any of those videos on YouTube where they buy some briars? Well, matter of fact, they'll buy like a whole bunch of different kinds of major brands of ice cream, and then they take it home and they leave it out for 2 or 3 days, and it doesn't melt. It keeps the same shape. Well, you know how it'll kind of crack and ripple when you take a scoop to it? It'll keep that same shape, but it won't melt. And that's because the stuff we're eating is completely synthetic food. Yuck. Not for me. I like the real deal myself. Okay, so now we're headed back into the Mars anomalies. And actually, Don, yeah, I do have a number of dinosaur photos. One in particular of a T-Rex that I did when I was on the set of Creation in the 21st Century. And Dr. Baugh had a beautiful model of a T-Rex poking its head out between some ferns. Life-size model. This thing's fierce looking. And yeah, I can't pull that up while I'm online. That'd take a lot of scrambling that I'm not technically adept enough to do at this point, but I'll bring that up at some point, maybe next time, and let you have a look at it. So, anyway, we're going to go back to Mars, and which I call Mickey Mouse on Mars, Mickey Martian, and you can see it inside the white square, maybe 2-3 feet across. And here is the raw 3D image before processing. And you can see how dark and grungy, and you can still see pretty good detail. But now I'm going to turn on the lights. Ta-da! Whole different critter, isn't it? That's a fair amount of work involved with bringing it to this state. But it's got that beautiful bevel around the perfectly even ellipse mouse hole with a rim around it. And yeah, you're right, Ramona. Nothing does taste the same, does it? It's kind of frustrating. Most of my stuff is organic, or I make it myself. Very good question, Ricardo. If you start with an image taken from one angle only, is it turned to X3D by using a synthetic light source on the image to create a 3D effect? That's not what I do. I suspect that's possible within Photoshop. I don't know. And that's something Alan at Mars the Second Genesis might be able to answer, because that might be a real effective way of making a depth map. What I will do, like in those regular photos that I showed you right at the beginning, is I'll find an image that I like. I'll clean it up, process it, make it look nice. And then I will create a depth map in Photoshop. And it's just, it's fairly intricate. It's not the type of thing you can just describe, but basically you're creating, if you could only see in grayscale, it's what it would look like in grayscale, but without any definition to speak of. And then you combine them in a program equipped to do so, and you end up with some really good 3D. But it takes a lot of experience to figure lighting angles and parallax, and you have to examine an image very carefully. So that, for example, in this image, which is one I did with a depth map, I'm presenting basically a true stereographic image that looks, I would say, within 95 to 98% identical to what you would see if you were standing there on the surface. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes I got to go in there. And Alan says, no, that won't work. Oh well, I was hoping for an easy peasy way to do it. And Ricardo, well, sorry about that, man. But you can still see, and there are more than enough images that I do in grayscale, particularly the ChemCam images. And I know that people who experience being colorblind can often see reds and blues. So this one is that egghead at the top. That's what the arrow's pointing at. And I'm not going to talk about it. It's been talked to death. And yeah, Don, I would love some kind of software that does automatic depth maps. And Looking Glass Technologies has one that's pretty good. You got to pay for it. But, for some reason it won't do Mars images. I don't know why. They're just images like any other image. But I've experimented with it on a couple of things, and it doesn't really work too good. So it's easier to do it by hand and go in there after the fact and tweak it, stereo photo maker, using the clone brush technique. So what I'm going to look at is what's inside the green target there, which is this interesting little item. It's not so little, it's several feet across. But right angle there in the corner, that are cut out. Part of something much larger at one time, I would think. Got those fingers sticking out at an angle from the cutout. And you got a whole line of drilled holes going up at an angle. That's strange. How does that come about? And then that blue egg down at the right hand at about the 4 o'clock position. That's strange because it's so perfect. It's so symmetrical that it probably is not natural. And then I pointed out that one might be a skull off to the right there. I don't think that it is, but I can understand why someone would be tempted to say that. Ricardo, you and your Triffids. You keep that up, there's going to be a group spanking. And now we're headed over to some eroded things I called notable erosion in one of Neil's Giga macros, 2923. And zooming in on the one on the lower right, and you can see right off this has non-fractal angles. Could that be erosion? Yeah, sure it could. But I don't think that it is. Right angles, 45-degree angle coming up the center, letter A, parallel grooves, a perfect curve at the bottom. Come on. I mean, the chance of that happening naturally, well, they say everything on Mars is just natural. Well, if that's the case, I'd love to buy a lottery ticket up on Mars because I'd win every time. And here's the other one. And this definitely looks machine-like. To me, anyway. Because you've got that little wheel at the top with spokes coming out of it. And then you've got that U-shaped piece sticking up. Looks like a padlock hasp at the bottom. And Don, no, you're not a thorn in my side. I have yet to touch base with Nev. Between the festivities last week and just my general schedule, it's really a bear trying to pull something off like that. But I suspect, and I will eventually check into it, that he has both left and right mass cam images of the same sols on his Gigamacro catalog. And if I can find those, you won't be able to sync them, but you should be able to open two different screens and view them in X3D, which is, again, the power of X3D. Because you can take those big images separated by quite a distance and still get a stereo. Okay, and then we're going to wander over to 1419, one I call Hatchling, something my buddy Laszlo found. Yeah, Don, I wish I could afford a secretary. I need a production staff, a secretary, a processing unit. I need a standalone studio instead of CGI. There are all kinds of bells and whistles I'd love to have, but I am still a small fish. I am a niche within a niche. And that's why I like to ask people to consider the possibility of being a Patreon supporter at $1 a month. That could make the difference. But I'm not in it for the money. And I feel uncomfortable even asking about it, but since it's available, I put it out there. And whatever happens happens. That's fine. Well, you know, when you get to have a really big channel like, you know, like Chris or Jimmy, or the really big ones like Edge of Wonder and channels like that, where you're making, you know, 10 grand a month, well, then you can start buying infrastructure, lighting and software and hardware and staff and research staff. Say, hey, check this out. You know, go find me every image you can find on this from Analyst's Notebook, and scour the web and see who first found this. You know, all that stuff. Anyway, let's zoom in on this rascal that's inside the yellow circle. And there we have something crawling out of an egg, I think, because it's got a leg sitting there on the outside towards us, doesn't it? Is that crazy? That's just nuts. Okay, and we're going to go to another raw image here, just 2D, of something Laszlo found in 3092, one of Nev's gigapans. And here we turn on the lights, and you can see a lot better. At least I think so. Off there in the distance, and here's a close-up of it in that muddy, yucky cover that NASA puts over everything. And Don, I'd say that egg is 3 feet from end to end, maybe. Somewhere around there. I tend to be pretty conservative on my measurements because it's really usually only the nav cam that has decent metrics. And you got to go in there and you got to find it somehow represented in one of the NavCam, 2 of the NavCam images to get your Z measurement, you know, X, Y, and Z. And then there'll be metrics and you can figure out how big it is and how far away it is. But it isn't always that easy. In fact, it's not easy at all. It's a lot of work. So let's turn on the lights here. And there we are with what looks like a living quarters. Ricardo, I think you're right. Yeah, 20, 30 inches in height. I think that kind of rings true there. And besides all the obvious stuff there, I mean, we've got the porthole in the side, which is really obvious. And really perfect, and really not natural. And I don't know, Don, if the egg was an entrance or an exit, something got stuck going in or coming out. Wouldn't you say? And I like to point out on this image that you got a lot of structure there between that porthole and the front dished-in portion. It's lots of little spheres and pipes, ridges. Are they all natural? I don't know. I really don't know. So anyway, it's a beautiful spring night. Very glad to have all 15 of you show up. Kind of a scant audience tonight, but you're certainly worth it. But we've covered everything we need to cover. If you got any more questions you want to ask, I get them out right now. If I don't see anything specific, I'll move towards signing off. You know, I have honeydews too, you know. I got to show up for work here. Did it photobomb the rover? Could be. We've seen things like that seem to be the case. And Alan is saying, no, it's part of the roof of an underground structure. All that area is the same. Check out the NavCam images from 1429 to 1430, which I will leave in your capable hands, sir. Because I don't have the time. I'm already working on next week's episode, and I haven't even finished creating this episode, the video. But that happens tomorrow after all the errands are run. All the doctor's appointments are gone too. And nothing serious. Just my 6-month physical. You got to do that when you get older. You gotta check in every 6 months and have them say, well, you're really fat, but you're in good health. Guy's a broken record. Okay, my friends, it's been very nice to see you. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for showing up. I do appreciate it. I love each and every one of you magnificent weirdos. And no, Alan, I haven't found the flying duck. I haven't had the luxury of time there. So y'all take care. This is your buddy Dave over at MarsX3D.